As I said earlier in the week on Shmini Atzeret, as the holidays wrapped up, Jewish life now returns to its regularly scheduled programming. So just a few things to note, that the time for our evening minyan at Beth Tikvah has moved to 7 p.m. It's half an hour earlier than during the summer months. That Kabbalat Shabbat Friday night is 6 p.m. and that Shabbat Mincha and Mincha on Sunday is going to vary with sunset. It's now around 6-ish, but we'll get earlier as we head towards the winter months. And morning minyan, 7:30 a.m. on most weekdays at Adath Israel. I'm also beginning to teach my series on Monday mornings, beginning on the 31st of October. It's going to be a class on sacred spaces in the Jewish legal tradition with a special focus on the holiness of the land of Israel. A class that I thought would be appropriate as we prepare for the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel this spring. So I have the dates in my calendar and all the material in my calendar, but I was actually stuck on the question of whether the class should be offered Zoom only or in-person only, or hybrid style. It's a question that I didn't have to ask before the pandemic. Also a question I didn't have to ask during the lockdown. But it's a question that I've been forced to think about, and then actually all religious leaders have been forced to think about as we move from COVID pandemic to COVID endemic and higher rates of protection and vaccination. The question relates to adult education classes, but it also relates to religious services and religious programming of all sorts. Should we move to being online, in person, or keep things hybrid? There is out there a very big and exciting world of online religious programming. In 2020, Google searches of religious terms shot up by 30%. 2021 by an additional 30%. Some apps that have been doing very well recently are religious, spiritual, and meditative. There's an app called Calm. It's done very well. Headspace and Pray.com saw tremendous growth and continue to see growth. And of course, Zoom and live stream synagogue services continue to be broadcast all around the world. These are, in many communities and in ours, tremendously successful. Thousands and thousands of participants. One congregation in New York over the high holidays hosted close to 70,000 people on their online stream. We're not anywhere close to that, but our online offerings do continue to provide an important way for those who are homebound to join us virtually, like the dozens that are watching us now on the live stream. And now we're actually exploring as a congregation adding a live stream camera to our chapel as well. We understand that digital offerings are now taken as they are. They are going to be part of the future of religious life and Jewish religious life and our synagogue life. But in this world of online programming, there is a crucial question that continues to fester. What will become of our in-person communal gatherings and religious experiences? What will become of our in-person learning, our in-person musical concerts, our in-person holiday programming? And some of you might be thinking that's a silly question to ask. Look around. We're having a beautiful service this morning, and there's lots of people here. We're celebrating a wonderful bar mitzvah, and people have flown in great distances to be here. That's true. But in general, our attendance, even at this service, is considerably down from where it was just a few years ago. That's just a fact. We have now eliminated our morning weekday service at Beth Tikvah. We just don't have a sustainable group of people who are willing to make that commitment. Our evening services are struggling. We did not have a minyan last night at Kabbalat Shabbat. And our education classes generally have a lot more people joining online than present in person. Some of this is for valid and prudent reasons. Congregants refraining from assembling in synagogue or anywhere in large numbers because of health concerns. And I want to be clear that if you're somebody for whom being in a crowd puts your health at risk, you should stay away. But let's be honest, there are many others who are attracted to virtual synagogue for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with their health. Virtual synagogue is more affordable, it is more convenient, you can bounce around different platforms and services to find your favorite rabbi or your favorite cantor. You can wear whatever you want, and on top of all of this, you can pretend like you're with others, but really be alone. You can be together without really being together. And even though that sounds a bit strange and odd, I think for many of us that is exactly where we want to be. The first human on earth did not want to be alone. According to Jewish tradition, Adam ached for companionship almost as soon as he was created. God acknowledged this human social need. The Torah says, Lo tov heyot adam levado. It is not good for this human to be alone, to be without community, to be without companionship. Throughout the creation story, as we read this morning, the Torah says, Tov, this was good, this was good. Vayar Elohim ki tov. There's only one time when the Torah says, Lo tov, this is not good, not complete, not the way humanity is meant to exist. And it is when Adam is alone, Lo tov. When God creates Adam's companion, the intention, the Torah says, is to create an ezer kenegdo, a helpmate opposite him. That's what the Torah calls Eve. The Midrash says that this phrase actually contains within it two opposing, even contrasting ways that Adam and Eve's relationship manifests. Ezer means a helper, helpful. Kenegdo means opposite him, or even opposing him. So the Midrash says, this applies to every marriage. Ezer kenegdo. Im zacha ezer. You found a good wife, she'll be helpful to you. Im lo zacha kenegdo. If you don't find a good wife, she'll oppose you on everything. Ezer kenegdo is a phrase that tells us that this very first relationship, the very first time that two human beings interact, has components of both help and opposition, cooperation and conflict. When Adam is alone, life is simple and peaceful. But as soon as Eve comes into the picture, the story gets much more complicated. Adam is confronted with another person's needs and desires, and the two of them struggle from miscommunication, opposition, sin, and blame. When another person is around, there is the potential power of an ezer, a helpmate, a partner, someone who supports you and journeys with you through life and walks beside you, and also the possibility of a kenegdo, disconnection, challenge, and conflict. And even in the best of marriages, There are always components of both. Anyone, in fact, who's ever lived with another person knows that it is hard, even when you love that other person deeply and know them deeply. There are moments when you are each other's azers and moments when you are kenegdo. And there is a level of surprise and unpredictability there, instability, that the internet actually tries very hard to avoid. That's the trick of the internet. It tries to speak to you alone, in your language, to bubble you in the beliefs that you already have. That's the key to getting your screen time and attention. The internet is a place that wants stability and comfort, not challenge and randomness. So in the digital religious universe, this manifests. You get a clear menu. I choose the subject of the sermon and which rabbi I want to hear speaking. I choose the length of the service. I choose the focus of the verses that I want to study. And if I don't like the sermon, I just turn it off. And if I'm praying in a virtual group, I can always opt out. You do not have to worry about sitting next to somebody who is wearing remarkably strong perfume. You don't have to worry about that annoying person who is talking in the row behind you when they shouldn't be. And you certainly don't have to think about what you are wearing. That is very, very different from walking into shul where you sit down and are at my mercy. You are at the mercy of whatever I choose to speak about, and whatever tune the chazan chooses to recite, and whatever bar mitzvah recites his or her Devar Torah. Here in shul, it is unpredictable. That's what it means to be with other human beings. There are azers here. There are people who will wish you Shabbat Shalom, those who will ask how you're feeling. And there are kenegdos here, the friction, the vulnerability, and the discomfort from which we grow. As the story continues in this morning's Parsha, humans encounter more and more conflict as they figure out how to live together. When we meet Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve, we already know that things will not bode well for him because of his name. Cain, or Cain, is taken from the root word liknot, to acquire, an acquisition. Cain has a mentality that is all about acquiring. Me, mine. Me, me, me. He is named that because his mother, Chava, feels she has an ownership over him. Cain. And Cain lives up to his name. When he finds himself in competition with his brother Havel, he cannot cope. He wants God's favor, feels he has a right to it. It is his and only his. And it's as if he says to his brother, look, buddy, there's no room here for the two of us. It's me or you. And Cain eliminates his brother so that he is alone. Now, after the murder, God punishes Cain for the crime. What is the punishment? Na venad tihiyeh ba'aretz. You will be a ceaseless, lone wanderer on the earth. It is almost like the Torah, in Cain's punishment, reverses time and goes back to the time when Adam was alone, without companionship. And that is a curse in the eyes of the Torah. God puts a mark on Cain's forehead, which will be forever a reminder of his sin and a protection for him as he wanders the earth alone. Now, most of us certainly don't end up in the extreme conflicts of Cain and Abel, but we do relate to the me, mine, and alone aspects of his personality. We like avoiding unpredictable social situations where things can get messy and unpleasant. And we do tend to prefer ordered programs where everything is planned and organized well in advance. Consider, for instance, the late Queen's funeral, which was probably the most planned and scripted event I have ever seen in my lifetime. Every nod, every bow, every person's seating, everyone's outfit actually was planned decades ago. And yes, it was beautiful. But hidden beneath the pomp and ceremony was actually a tribute to the Queen that was very different. It was what they called the queue, the line. The British call it a queue. People queued up for hours. At one point, the wait was 24 hours. They queued up in the chilly weather to pay their respects to the Queen's coffin. As reported in the Wall Street Journal, I quote, "In a city filled with tourist attractions, the queue has become an attraction in itself, drawing thousands of locals and tourists alike to walk up and down the River Thames and marvel at this line." The queue attracted people from all backgrounds and became a place of British pride and connection. People distributed blankets and folding chairs. People held each other's place in line when they went to get some food. It was an unexpected opportunity for strangers to come together, find commonalities, and support each other in a time of national grief. My sense is that one reason people were attached to this queue was because it felt authentic and human. They liked that there was no script. People did not know how long they would be there and whom they would encounter in that line. It is the difference between viewing a service online and showing up in person and going along with the flow. It was a moment when ordinary people could be azers, helpmates for other ordinary people. To be sure, our Jewish ritual structure often feels more like the Queen's funeral than the queue outside. This is a very structured service. But when we access these from afar, we miss so much. You miss the chance to sense the room, to meet somebody new, to be in real community, to experience something that is hard to articulate, but is palpable. I felt it personally just a few weeks ago when I went to see a Jays game with my kids at Rogers Stadium. I have an HD television at home and could easily have watched the game from the couch. But at my kids' insistence, we got dressed up, put on our Jays hats, schlepped to Finch Station, took that awful endless subway down to Union, and walked by foot from Union Station to Rogers Stadium. It was the first time I had been to a big sports venue since the start of the pandemic, but going in person made all the difference. We had lots of fun together, just me and my 3 older kids. We told jokes along the way and disturbed the other people on the subway. We saw friends at the stadium we didn't expect to see. And from your seats, you feel the live energy and enthusiasm of the crowd and the tension at every important play. You see the other people in your section, maybe have a couple words with them, and you gaze out at the thousands of fans, all focused on the same thing you are. It is impossible to describe, but it is powerful. And I think the same indescribable power exists when mourners gather at our minyan, standing shoulder to shoulder in memory of their loved ones. The same indescribable power exists when people sing and hum along to the choir and to the chazan. The same indescribable power when children are here in our chapel or downstairs playing together and learning perhaps about the Parsha. When some worshiper sitting next to you closes his or her siddur and wishes you a Shabbat Shalom. It makes all the difference. Cain's mark is normally understood as a scar, but the Torah uses an interesting word to describe this scar. The mark is called an ot. Now, an ot can be a sign or a scar, but there's something else that is called an ot, a letter. The aleph bet are called otiyot. An ot can be a letter. And actually the Zohar says it was not a scar that was placed on Cain's forehead. It was a letter, the letter Vav. Vav in Hebrew means and, as if to say that Cain's sin was failing to make room for others, failing to coexist, failing to be Cain veHevel, Cain and Abel. Cain carried that ot with him for the rest of his life because it was the growth that he needed. And frankly, at this time, it is the growth we all need. In the words of the late Rabbi Sachs, Judaism is an insistently communal faith. One who separates himself from the community may lead a life of righteousness, but he or she leads it alone, and that is not the Jewish way. As we heard from Gavin this morning, the past few years have been difficult. Many of us have spent a lot of time alone. Even if we were blessed during these months to live in Florida with our close inner circle, we were disconnected from our routines. We have the opportunity now, as we return, to pause and acknowledge the ways in which the world has changed, the ways in which all of us have changed, and perhaps even the ways that we should still be changing. We all carry part of the pandemic with us. It is a scar, a mark on our lives, both collectively and individually. Here in our congregation, we saw bar and bat mitzvahs without extended family present. We saw young couples endure the stressful few weeks of having a newborn without the support of any family by their side. We saw people whose loved ones lay dying in the hospital and they had to say goodbye over an iPad. These are devastating experiences. And even the things that seem to pale in comparison have had a huge impact on people's lives. Teenagers who missed their graduations, children whose school plays were canceled, young adults who missed out on essential years of social development, mental health challenges, moments we can never get back. These are marks on all of us in different ways, scars that will remain forever. At the same time, I hope that the coming year will allow and make some room for the connective Jewish spaces that we occupy together. We will not survive if we are determined to go forward by ourselves. The human encounter is what matters, with ezers and kenegdos that make life messy and stunningly vibrant, chaotic and overwhelmingly beautiful, uncomfortable and wonderful. To learn the lesson of the connecting Vav, which represents the relationships that God weaved into the fabric of humanity from the very beginning, and that must remain at the heart of real Jewish living even today. Shabbat Shalom. We continue.